When it comes to composing my photos, there's a barrier that I hit time and again, and I'm sure there's many of you that face the same issue too. Today I'm going to try and fix that. I'm going to use this. Let me show you what I mean. So today we're exploring a rainforest in Snowdonia called Coed y Brenin. In English that's Forest of the Kings, and you can really see why. It is absolutely gorgeous here. The growth is unbelievable. A lot of it is very natural deciduous forest. There's some plantation forest, but not loads that you have to deal with. And the deciduous forest generally means a very interesting forest, so it's great for woodland compositions. And the reason I wanted to get here early in September before all the colour is here is because this year I'm going to try and make this the forest I come to for my woodland photography. I'm actually planning a whole series on how to do woodland photography, sharing composition tips, how to get the right conditions and that sort of stuff. So if you're interested in that, follow along, because there's going to be a whole series on woodland photography. So I'm treating today more as a scouting session than an actual photography session. I don't expect to come away with any great photos. Not that I won't, but just the expectations aren't high. And those are really my sort of favourite days, because when the pressure's off, I feel like I can be more myself with my photography. And by taking the pressure off in terms of rushing as well, you know, trying to get to the next composition, then I think if I double down on that sort of relaxed photography experience, that'll be expressed in my photography a bit more. Now, I don't want to sound too artsy-fartsy, I'm not that type, but I'm thinking it could really, really help. So the app that I'm using isn't actually anything fancy. It's the timer app on my phone. Nothing special about it. It's simply just a method of forcing myself to stay in a location for a certain amount of time. Now, I've dedicated 10 minutes to each composition today. Anytime I see something I think, yes, that could be a composition, then I set the time of 10 minutes and make myself wait that long to find a composition that works. Because when you turn up to a composition and you rush it, then very rarely do you get your best photos, as I demonstrated last week. Oh, I'm running out of time. Hopefully this week I'm demonstrating the exact opposite. So the reason I've chosen this as a composition to really spend some time on is because there's this very interesting character of a tree. Now, with woodland photography, that's always what I try and aim for. Find an interesting character first, then build your composition around it. And this is probably one of the most interesting characters I've ever seen in the forest. A moss-covered tree with a very deep overhang. I don't know how it's still standing. Must have some very deep roots, which in itself makes it a very interesting character. It also stands out because the bark is much whiter than the trees around it. The difficulty with this composition is that from the best angle where you can see the overhang, you're shooting upwards into the forest. Very bright behind it, lots of speckled light, which doesn't look very good with woodland photography. If I was in a rush, this is the exact spot I would take the photo from and just move on. But I think I'm going to do a little bit of looking around to see if I can give this image a little polish. There we are, I've had my full 10 minutes of looking around and scouting this composition, and I've found the best one, I think. So this has been a really tough one to compose. The composition I've settled on, I really do quite like, but it's got a lot of challenges with it. So I'm using these mossy rocks in the foreground on this forest floor and a nice orange carpet as sort of a foreground, a leading light up to the tree that's overhanging. If I keep the composition nice and low, I cut out that top bit where all those bright bits are really distracting. The issue is, from this angle, this is the best place to sort of get those rocks and the tree and have the tree on the third line. However, we've got this beech tree here that's, the branches are cutting into the frame. Now, I'm unwilling to chop off branches. I'm not going to vandalise the forest for the sake of a photo. So what I've done is I've just tucked the branch because it's nice and bendy behind another branch, and that means I can get this photo without it cutting into my frame, without having to vandalise the forest. It's a win-win situation. Part of the problem with rushing is that I suffer from what-if-isms, if you know what I mean by that. What if there's a better composition just a few minutes down the path? What if the light suddenly goes? What if the conditions change? There's all of these what-ifs when you're doing photography. And if they're all you're thinking about, then you will constantly be rushing. And that's the trap I've fallen into. I don't give each composition enough time to sort of be the best version of itself, or for me to represent the best version of it, I suppose is the actual way of saying it. I think this extends from living a very rushed life anyway, as most people do these days. And as a result, everything's just rush, rush, rush. And that's spilled over into my photography. That's not a good way to approach your photography. Slowing down, taking your time, doing what you're supposed to do, which is actually enjoying the photography. I think that's where my photography could level up again. Right, I think we found our next composition, so it's time to start the timer. I'm actually looking at this one handheld first, sort of having a look around, sort of see what I like, because before I get my tripod out and everything, I want to know exactly where I want to be. I'm on a mountain bike track here actually. I'm stood just off to the side of it in case anybody comes flying down. You know, with these modern glorified mopeds, the electric bikes, you can barely hear them coming before they're right on you, and they're going at quite the speed, so making sure I'm not on the way I'm going to get knocked over. Definitely don't want my camera gear getting knocked over. What I like about this though is that it's a perfect S-bend leading through the forest. It's a nice narrow path which I think looks better. It doesn't take up too much of the frame. These wide paths can often be a bit too much, a bit too dominant in the frame, whereas a nice narrow one like this that you get on a lot of biking tracks means that it carves a lovely S shape through the forest. I wish there was a bit more of a character here. I mean, we've got this lovely mossy tree at the end of it, sort of a character. A bit of atmosphere would be nice. This would be perfect if there was some fog, maybe come back in autumn when there's even more colour. Some of these ferns have started turning a sort of orange glow. I've noticed that today. I think we're going to get an early autumn this year, I've got a feeling, because the UK's had such a cold summer, nearly the coldest summer for nearly 10 years. I think autumn's going to come a bit earlier. That could be quite a good thing though, we'll get the colours a lot earlier. It's one of those compositions that's so simple that you have to get it very precise, because anything that's sort of out of shape, anything that's placed wrong will really stand out in a composition as simple as this. So spending that bit of extra time, I think, is what really makes this a much, much better photo. By the way, I absolutely love helping people to improve in their photography, so if that's something you're interested in, then feel free to subscribe. I'd love to take you along on these journeys I go on. And if you're the sort of person that sort of roots for one of the underdog channels, then your subscription would be much appreciated. So was this a success? Am I going to do this every time I do photography now? Well, probably not. I'm not going to set a timer every time I stop for a composition. Today was more about the practice of slowing down, and I think that's what I'm going to take away. Because slowing down with your compositions, it really has helped me today. I've not necessarily come away with any portfolio photos, but I've come away with the best versions of what those photos could be. And that was my aim. And that's the aim going forward too. Which means that when I do get those great opportunities for photography, like I had last week that I absolutely ruined, that means that I can work the composition much better. And that's something you should take away too. Don't be afraid to slow down in your photography. Even if everything is happening very quickly, make sure you take your time and give the photo the time it deserves. I'll see you next time.